Hello everyone and welcome back to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. It's Hayden here, and if you haven't seen it already, there's a pretty cool community event going on at the moment run by three of Flesh and Blood's casters in Tan and Grace, Flake, Matt DeMarco, and Mitch Leslie, Ubershouts, who are running this pretty cool Goliath Gauntlet series with some of the most well-known and top players in the world right now in a round of 16 bracket that narrows down. The first of these matches have just been broadcast over this past weekend. And today I'm going to break down the deck that I actually played or have been playing in the event, a Rhinar deck that I think is pretty cool and I wanted to share. The event itself has been awesome. It's been super well run and I hope they do this again. I think it's really cool. I think it's something that we want to see in Flesh and Blood outside of these big events like Pro Tours, Callings, ProQuest seasons, and of course World Championship coming up. And just gives this kind of, ability, real watchable, easy to get a hold of, and we don't unfortunately get coverage for all of these types of events like Callings and ProQuest, Nationals, etc. So to have this has been awesome. But the deck I played is Rhinar. Decided to take Rhinar to this event. This was a list I guess I've been working on in sort of preparation for the World Championship, something that I started with. Every time the sort of format freshens up a bit, Rhinar is a hero I definitely turn to, and this felt like kind of one of the formats that was the fairest for Rhinar. There's a lot of things happening in this format where we're starting to see decks play a bit more fair, with Chain Living Legend, Prism Living Legend now. The sort of format is slowing down and there's explosive turns and I guess unfair turns are starting to move out of the format a little bit as they're being policed by decks like Icelander and of course Ultim continuing. So the deck I'm going to share with you is this Rhinar deck. It's a club Rhinar deck. It really harkens back to some of the early sort of builds of Rhinar from the Arcane Rising, Crucible of War days. We're really looking to get a lot of value out of your turn cycles, up trade in value, and then finish off with these sort of small combos that the deck has, or bigger combos that the deck can produce. Now, if you look at this kind of this format as it is right now, we're starting to see these ideas start to come out. We saw Michael Hamilton with his Wounded Bull, his attack action Icelander take out US Nationals, and that really revolves around this idea of trading up on value and then having this big sort of finishing turn plus a way to control the game in the form, for Icelander at least, of disruption. We've seen the 6 for 10s in the form of Red Glacials and Thunderquakes come in for Ultim in recent weeks through the national season. And again, predicated on that idea of just up trading your cards. And that seems to be a bit of where the meta is going back to. And who plays well into that kind of format? Well, Rhinar does. Rhinar can do that same sort of thing, trade up on these value of cards. And I'll break the deck list down and show you exactly how it does that. But then also has this ability to just close the game out with nothing said by your opponent in the form of quad intimidate, triple quad intimidate hands that kind of just take the game and the decisions away from your opponent. So that's why I chose to play Rhinar in this event, and I'm going to break that down. So while Icelander has things, we talked about the Icelander deck, while Icelander has things like Frost Hex combos to finish games out and disruption in the form of Channel Frigid, Hypothermia, Channel Olympic Expanse, Frostbite tokens, Rhinar has this ability to basically just say, well, you don't get to play the game in the last turn with Intimidate triggers, Blood Rush Bellows, of course, and then we also have this little piece of equipment called Scabskin Leathers, which can do some pretty silly things for us and really allow us to trade up on value. So I do just want to say, before we get into breaking down the deck, we're closing in on 5,000 subscribers here at Arsenal Pass. If you aren't subbed to the channel, please do go ahead, drop us a subscription, and hit the little thumbs up like. Now let's get into the deck and break it down. Let's jump straight into it and break down the core of this deck, because there is some really interesting choices in this list and some ones that I think are, particularly fun as well. So this is what we're looking at as, I guess what you'd call the core of the deck. So the traditional sort of brute shell, and there's some different numbers and a few different choices in what you might expect. So we'll kind of go through this first. On the right hand side, you can see the core of the resource cards. Now in the core here, you can see there's 18 blues actually. I'm in a big fan with these newer sort of, I guess, formats where you see Icelander start to come through, and I guess a bit more of these, some more utility blues come through in the form of Clearing Bellows and High Roller to actually increase the blue count a little bit. So that's what we're looking at here, a slightly increased blue count, 18 in the main, but we do cut down in some matchups, especially where some cards like Reckless Swing might not be as relevant, and we do have a couple more blues in the sideboard, which we'll talk about. In terms of other choices, of course, Clearing Bellows, High Roller, so they are just functional. They're downgrades on Barrage and Beatdown, but they do similar jobs when you're trying to end with this big sort of quad or triple intimidate turn. They can act as a replacement for a Barrage and Beatdown, especially if you need to do it a couple of times. These cards can be really valuable. Blues to pitch early and get them back later, or after you shuffle from something in the deck. If actually, no Sand Sketch plans in this deck, so no shuffle effect in this deck. You'll notice that's the kind of omission. No Sand Sketch plan. Instead, we play these, and we play Smash Instinct. So the reason we play blue Smash Instinct is what this deck really wants to do is finish that last turn with this big Intimidate turn. And this is a blue that has natural Intimidate on it and allows you to utilize your blues a little bit better, as well as trade some damage through the game. So say you have double Barraging Beatdown, a blue, and the Smash Instinct, of course higher blue count. This allows you to intimidate with damage on it, as opposed to just coming in with the club, in case you don't have, another high roller or clearing bellows, for example. In terms of the chunk through here, I've kind of laid these out a little bit differently to how I lay out some other decks, and that's because there's a few different portions of things happening here. You've got your traditional 6 attacks that kind of run down through here and to the side, but they are in 3 different areas, which I'll explain in a second. So all pretty standard. Only 2 beasts within in this deck. This deck is not massive on discarding, and it has a lower sort of ratio of 6s in it. So often when we hit this beast within, we're taking more damage than you might expect in a more traditional brute deck. So we actually cut down to just 2 beast withins. I've played with 0, I've played with 1, I've played with 3. I like 2. I like access to this card. I think it's really important. We do have some pulpings in the sideboard, and I think this card pairs really well with that to be explosive into matchups like Icelander. So I do like having access to some number, but I'm on 2 at the moment. Fiendor's Fighting Spirit, a really important card I think that that Brute has gained from the previous set from Uprising. This card is always representing what we talked about at the start with that value, 3 for 7, especially, of course, we move behind. But it's always a value card, and at worst, it's a 6 attack that's going to allow you to proc everything else. Otherwise, pretty standard. We do play 3 CNC, Disruption, package of choice for me. I think CNC is still really important in this format, but I can and have played with Erase Face, and I can see that being sort of the option to go over this, especially if Viserai comes back into the meta. I think Erase Face is a really important card you want to have access to. Savage Feast, this card is super important, one of my favorite cards to play in Brute, especially a club build. We talk about that value of getting, sort of trading up on damage. So if you have a Savage Feast, a blue, and a 6 attack, you can trade into 11 damage plus an Arsenal card off of the something like Savage Feast with the help of Scabskin Leathers. So really big on this card. Swing Big, of course, does the thing we talked about, trades up on damage. Barraging Beatdown. I've got it in the kind of package of what I'm calling kind of enablers to do sort of some really big crazy turns and in-game finishes. Barraging Beatdown, Blood Rush Bellows, Savage Feast. But also it's part of this kind of package of trading up on damage. Pitching a card, so playing a Barraging Beatdown red, pitching a card and coming with club always threatens 8 damage or takes 2 cards from the opponent. So at minimum, you're trading card for card with your opponent, which into matchups where you actively want to play Barraging Beatdown just for damage is exactly what you want to do. And if they want to hold their hand, you're able to trade damage, and 8 damage is no joke, and it's going to allow you to get ahead and get to where you need to be. So a big philosophy of the deck rotates around that, and Barraging Beatdown is really important for that. Equipment-wise, pretty standard. Here's what we start with. Scabskin Leathers, Fiendor's Spring Tunic, Gambler's Gloves, Crown of Providence, and of course the Romping Club. It is a Romping Club deck looking to get the value out of those cards. Now, the last kind of main deck package, as it were, is these go-again threats. These things that allow you to swing an attack and then come in with club. Now, before I kind of break this down, the last thing I want to talk about is 2 Blood Rush Bellows in the deck. Now, I think you can play 3 if you can find space for it, and there's some cards in the sideboard you can cut. This card is kind of underwhelming, I think, and not a claw build. It really requires you to have multiple things happen. So it requires you to have a good, to roll multiple actions of Scabskin Leathers into a Blood Rush Bellow, into finding some good threats, which when we're playing more Intimidate focus as opposed to, I guess, damage focus, or we're trying to trade with some of these cards, Blood Rush Bellow can be quite underwhelming and draw the wrong combination of cards that you need and not be the damage, the push that you need. I find these straight Intimidate cards, Barraging Beatdowns, etc., and the value package that we're playing, because we're trying to trade up on damage again, better in these situations. So I've actually tried all the way from 0, playing no Blood Rush Bellows, and I think I want access to some. I think it's really important, especially in some of your maybe grindier matchups, even into Ultimate, even if they're not defensive and they are aggressive, you do want access to a card like this. It is just another functional way to intimidate and replaces itself. And if you do find one of these sort of 1 or 0 costs, you can get additional value as well, so without having to roll the Scabskin Leather. So I do want access to some of these. Now, let's talk about this value package. So I want to start with E-Strike. E-Strike kind of one that I've been playing in Rhinar basically since Uprising came out. I've kind of felt this move towards a bit more fairness, especially as Prism's gone to Living Legend now as well. Chain before that, Star of the Show before that, of course. And Line Strike just allows you to fix hands, trade cards, get a Barraging Beatdown or Intimidate card into your arsenal, get a setup happening while pushing damage. It also allows you to do things even off 3 cards where you just come in for 5 and then 4 off club. Now that's on rate, and that's not really what you want to be doing, but it is reasonable if you need to push some damage. Otherwise, if you do on 3 cards, you can arsenal something like a Barraging Beatdown, like we said, get him for 7 damage and trade up a little bit, 2 cards for 7 again. Similar philosophy with the Scar for Scars and Life for Lives. 2-card hand, a yellow or a blue with Scar for a Scar allows you to push 8 damage with the club, and with Life for Life, again, you're actually threatening 9 damage with that on-hit effect from Life from a blue, and we do play a higher blue count, which makes it pretty easy to get this off. Now, in these aggressive matchups or mid-range matchups, generally you are trading damage anyway, so these cards really shine. You can always turn these cards on. And then the end of the game is where you really have that big turn. Use your equipment at that point in the game. Keep them till the end so that you can stay a little bit lower or parity on life, get value out of these cards, and then push through at the end. So that's kind of the philosophy of the deck. You've got that main core sort of brute traditional package, and then you've got this, a bit more sort of, or even more traditional, maybe a bit more of a boomer package, some might say, of these go wide attacks that enable club to get more value. So I've gone through so far the main sort of packages of what this Rhinar list is, from that traditional brute Rhinar package that you expect with the 6 attacks that's kind of functioning to do what you'd expect it to do, plus that sort of value package that's being played in most matchups, those E-Strikes, Scar for Scars, typically played in basically every single matchup, and Life for Life, particularly into those aggressive decks to give you options. But there is a few other things that are what I would say are traditional sideboard packages and definitely not being played in majority of matchups, played depending on what you're going into. So that's laid out in front of us. I want to go through the defense reaction side first. Now, that all you got is a pretty strong and powerful pickup from Uprising alongside Fandale's Fighting Spirit for something like Rhinar. Being a yellow strip defense reaction, really important. Can still use it if you draw multiple, or if you're not going to be using a defense reaction on that turn, maybe you've gained tempo, can still be used to pitch and swing the club, which is really, really important. But what it does do is lets you cycle and keep that pressure up. Effectively, the card says it worst, gain 2 life, cycle this, which is really strong when you're playing a value-orientated game. So big fan of that. You got into things like Fi against Rosetta Thorn. So that's where that's coming in. And then we have access to Sync Belows as kind of our other zero-cost defense reactions into the more aggressive decks. So typically always playing those, again, into Fi and some number into Rune Blades, depending on what I'm expecting. And then we have these Unmovables. Now, the Unmovables are there for the Guardians, for the Ultims. I don't like too many of these because once you get tempo, once you get tempo and you can still play your value package like we showed before, you can start to intimidate and push through. You don't want to be drawing too many of these types of effects. They can really clog you up. So I'm quite a big fan of 2 Unmovable. I think you can play 3 if you want to go down a more defensive route and a setup route against maybe slower sort of Ultims where they're trying to place big attacks. But these Ultims that are going a little bit wider, pushing damage, this guy can be a bit of a liability. And I find that Sync Below plus a couple of Unmovables is, in your equipment is kind of where you want to be. And then just try and keep some tempo at some points in the game. So that's the defensive package. And then we've got what I guess is an extra Intimidate, extra 6+ attacks that allow you to run into these decks like Ultim and push sort of these finishing combos. So Pack Hunt's a particularly good one because it works well off just 2 cards to actually take cards from the opponent when you need to, but also doubles down in those big turns as another card that intimidates and pushes damage. This plus 3 other Intimidators at the end of a game is big damage to push through, so definitely an important card. And then this Alpha Rampage is kind of like the 4th Pack Hunt. Alpha Rampage is a card that I think is, in terms of like the trade-off that you're getting, is coming down and down as the power of sets get higher and higher. It's 3 cards effectively that you pay for 9 damage. Great when you want that double Intimidate, but when you don't, the card can really underperform. And when you can push, damage with Barrage and Beatdowns, things like that have damage tacked on, plus the Intimidate, and can actually get you to above rate, you want to look at cards like Pack Hunt, I think. So Alpha Rampage a bit more, works with cards like Massacre and stuff, which we don't play on this list. So just 1 here, which effectively acts like a 4th Pack Hunt. Pulping, these are basically just for Icelander to allow you to go wide and push damage. And with added 6 attacks, you can get up to that sort of half the deck being 6 attacks, which is a pretty important number, I find. And then Energy Potions, again, really great sideboard cards against Icelander. You land one of these early, it really just makes it hard for them to put the Aether Ice Vein beat down on you, as I like to call them, or, really sort of test your resources mid to late game. Things like Blizzard, you can always play around once you have this energy potion down. And they allow you to set up end games, play through something like a Frostbite plus some Disruption for a Quad Intimidate, and push through lethal. So I think Energy Potion really important. Allows you to get to that 20 blue mark in that matchup. And then against something like an Ultim as well, you can side out some other blues for the Energy Potion. And last, we've got the Skullhorn and the Nullrune Gloves, our access to Arcane Barrier. Now, I think in a format, and I've said this quite a bit on the pod and other deck techs I've done, I think Arcane Barrier 1 into Icelander is pretty good. I think it's a bit of a trap sometimes to run more. But when we have the Skullhorn that's effectively free, this card can sort of overperform. Now, with these kind of Wounded Bull and, attack action Icelanders coming about, playing the Crown of Providence into most of this matchup, the Icelander matchup in particular, might just be better. And you might be able to cut this card for something else or keep it around if you expect Kano. And just play that 1 Nullrune and play the Crown of Providence into these attack action sort of builds. And then just trade your damage, find your spot. Don't get too low on life so they can arcane you out or frost hex you out. and then kill them with your big Intimidate package. All right, last thing I want to share for this Rhinar deck tech is a few of my sort of like top tips and things I found playing this particular Rhinar build over the last few weeks and in a bit of testing for this Goliath Gauntlet series. Now, the key thing is the idea of trading in this deck. You know, we talked about all those value cards, the Scar for Scars, the Life for Lives, the E-Strikes, the Fendel's Fighting Spirit. You really do want to try and keep your life at parity against these other aggro decks, these other mid-range decks, and then use your equipment, maybe one card on defense before you set up this final big push turn using those Intimidate cards. So things you're looking to put in Arsenal are a Barraging Beatdown. It is something like a Bloodrush Bellow for a final turn. If you have the Alpha Rampage or the Pack Hunt, those sort of cards are great cards to set in Arsenal as well. Savage Feast, another great card that can push damage over and also be a great finisher if you can get the Scab Skin Leathers. And that's why Gambler's Gloves can be so important as well. That card is a great powerhouse that can lead you to, 11 damage base with the Romping Club plus the Savage Feast. Add on top Barraging Beatdowns or Bloodrush Bell on top of that. Now you've really got a really strong end game. Scab Skin Leathers, when to use it? Pretty sparingly. Like where you really want to use it, it's a great defensive card, and where you can get a lot of value out of it is with cards like Savage Feast, and where you might have you might be higher on life with things like Scar for Scar, Life for Life, but you can still get good value if you roll off those. It's not always going to be correct, but I do tend to roll pretty aggressively if I am higher on life, and I can take advantage of it once I have the Gambler's Gloves up. Once those are down, I'm looking to be a bit more defensive, and I might even block with a 2 cost and actually trade down on value if I have to, just to sort of keep ahead in the game, keep tempo. Okay, that's going to do it for this Rhinar deck tech, my Goliath Gauntlet series deck that I played. Make sure you go and check those guys out over at 983 Media. Find all the round of 16, the quarterfinals, semifinals, finals, and all those rounds from each of the both brackets. Some amazing players duking it out there, and an awesome sort of initiative that's going on. Plus, of course, some amazing gameplay. Hope you enjoy this list. I think it's a very fun list to play. I love the value-orientated style of club, always have, and I think right now in this meta can actually do a really, really good job for you. So enjoy the list. And also do want to shout out, we're closing in on 5,000 subscribers here at Arsenal Pass. So if you're not already subbed to the channel, please do so. Drop a like on the video. We really appreciate it. Helps us hit those milestones that we're aiming for. Otherwise, until the next video, we'll see you next time.